Hi, and welcome to the TI4 Strategy Sessions. My name is Patience of Virtue, and this is a series of Twilight Imperium 4 strategy sessions, starting with a Strategy 101 round table. The participants are Stads, who helped me cook up this idea, Vision S, the Defterus, and Duke Lukum. The participants are some of the best TI4 players from North America and Europe, and the series continues with Strategy 201 with Seven, 202 with Olo, and 203 with Mantis. Again, three of the premier Twilight Imperium players on Earth, and these are one-on-one conversations we have in response to the roundtable discussion. We hope to continue the series in the new year with 300 and 400 level sessions, specifically talking about the Prophecy of Kings expansion and the way that the highest level strategy changes due to the new expansion components. In the meantime, I'd like to thank very much a few people, including Flat Tomatoes, who recorded and produced this series, as well as a lot of tournament games and Twilight Imperium content that they have on their YouTube channel from this past year. And of course, Space Cats Peace Turtles, Matt and Hunter, who've done so much in terms of their podcast and all their recording, their YouTube channel as well, and everything they do to bring the community together and set the example and make something like this possible. Of course, we should thank Simon Jean-Fait Le Pen for their free instrumental music mix from YouTube, which we've used as music. And to all of you for listening, thank you very much. And we look forward to doing more for you in the future. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, everybody, to TI4 Strategy 101 Roundtable. I'm Patience is a Virtue, and I'm joined by some of the coolest and best TI4 players from all over North America and Europe. This is a thing we've been talking about doing for a little while, and we're putting it together. And I think it just fills a little bit of a niche around strategy at the highest level for people who are relatively new to the game or more experienced and want to explore strategy questions at the largest level. There's lots of Space Cats, Feast Turtles, and other discussions out there that dig in deeper, and we're going to try to take it up to the big level. So I am joined by an amazing panel of people, starting with Duke Lukum. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Duke Lukum, but you'll probably just hear me called either Duke or Luke. So yeah. That's me.
Yeah, and Stads.
Howdy, I'm Stads, kind of a new player here. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Patience.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And the Defterus.
Hello, everyone. I live for conflict.
And Vision S.
Hi, I'm the girl.
Well, we have a fair bit of gender and orientation diversity at the table, but we also have like really some of the most experienced and skilled players. And Stads, you may be newer to the community, but you're a very active participant in strategy discussion in the community, and so you totally belong here with us. So we're going to start. We have a few questions. We're going to work through them. We're going to have like a bit of a moderated approach, but a pretty free-flowing discussion. And then what's going to happen, TI4 Strategy 202 will come next, and that will be a different approach where three players, Olo, Seven, and Mantis, all get a chance to respond for 20 minutes-ish, 20, 30 minutes-ish each to this discussion. So that's kind of 202. And then maybe we'll regather and do 203 or 301, sorry, that's 201. And strategy 301 would be maybe after POK comes out and that meta establishes it. Maybe we'll revisit it all. So in the meantime, let's get rolling with TI4 Strategy 101 Roundtable with question one, which is, how did you get into TI4 and why do you love it so? So we'll start off with Celia on this one, and then we'll just go one at a time. Go ahead, Vision S. Sorry.
No worries. I think everyone by now knows that I go by Celia or Vision S or Queen of TI4. I actually got into TI4 because after my daughter was born last year, my husband was playing a lot of TI with the community, and I was like, that is stupid. Who sits around and plays a game for 6 hours? Why would you do that? And slowly but surely, he sort of like wore me down and I gave it a shot. And the thing about me is that when I start something, I want to be good at it. Like, I don't want to just be okay at a thing. And now, like 3,600 hours later, I spend a good deal of time in my spare time playing with this community. And I think I love it because it reminds me of all the things I like about strategy, right? We get to take the game from one game to the next, and it can be completely different depending on the people that are sitting at the table, what type of game we're playing, if it's just a casual game or if it's a tournament game or something really serious. And then the things with Franken and other homebrews, it's made a complete change in myself and in my confidence and just my gameplay overall. Now John and I play Rebellion, and it's a completely different experience than it was when we first played, just because of the progress that I've made with Twilight. So yeah, I love it.
Cool. Wow. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna go back up to the top. Luke, go ahead with this one. How did you get into TI4 and why do you love it so?
I got into it through the board game society at the university. They play much shorter games usually because you don't really have time to sit down and play TI. But then one of my friends from that was like, "Oh, hey, this weekend we're going to play TI. It takes 8 hours and we have 5 people and it's much better with 6." And then I was like, "Sure, why not? I can lose a weekend." And then I lost the rest of my life basically. Yeah. And we're just here from there. Yeah, that was like a year and a half ago now, I guess. But I just really like it because it's got tons of impactful choices throughout the game, and it's like an amazing blend of hard maths calculation-y game and also negotiation and diplomacy.
It's like, do you like board games? Okay, TI is board games in one game, every game.
Yeah.
Like every board game.
It's we got a board, we got cards, we got plastic ships flying around and fighting each other.
You have yelling
or you
at
can
each
go
other.
the entire game and not fight anyone and only get fought. So amazing.
How about you, Def? You kind of kicked it off there with your
yeah. I'm not, so I there's this very nice board gaming bar I go to a very, very much in the city I live in called Aalborg. And they had this big ass box with Twilight Imperium on the title, and we didn't know what it was about. So we tried it and thought it was neat. So just like Luke said, spent the rest of my life doing it. I found the community through the Space Cats Peace Turtles, as most of us did, I imagine. Just looked up their guides, and I was like, oh, okay, this all makes sense. I didn't keep that opinion, but some of it, yes.
How about you, Stads?
I have nothing quite so exciting. Back in February of this year, just before the indoor times, I played it at a board game meetup. I've been a board game nerd all my life and had wanted to play it for a while, and finally scheduled a day with a group of wonderful people to play it. And it was a complete mess. We got so many rules wrong, and looking back, it was just insane. But I had such a great time, and then I got into this community, and since then I've been addicted, just like everyone else. And I love the game so much. I really, really love how a long strategic plan is so important. You have to kind of know where you're going, but there's a lot of random variance from objectives and action cards and agendas and other players. So figuring out how to go from point A to point B is so important, and the negotiation means you have a billion possible paths and you get to pick the one you like. It's awesome.
I guess another thing that comes with TI being every board game is that you can be good at literally any part of TI, and that will make you a better TI player. Like, you don't need to be able to crunch the math on the ship battles if you can just talk everybody into not attacking you, right?
Yeah.
Like, I guess my favorite thing about the game is that you can literally get better at any part of it, and that will be good for you.
For sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Deft. And I got introduced to TI3 via a cousin like a decade ago, 11 years ago, something like that. And played like just on the table and played TI4 just on the table when it came out, and just was so excited about it all the time that I was like, okay, there's got to be something happening online. And yeah, found Space Cats Peace Turtles, and then found the Discord and was like, oh, that's dangerous. and then resisted that for a number of months. Like I played in the spring of 2018 a few games with Magi and some others when the Discord and the TTS mod were relatively new. And then like later in the summer, I just started playing and found Seven and Mantis and those folks and TG Welch and stuff, and just never looked back. Went in head first, and it was pretty amazing. I'm actually a really slow learner and probably wouldn't be that great at TI4 if I hadn't have like had such a long apprenticeship. But I'm honored to be doing this with you folks, who I consider to be some of the greatest players. So let's do the overview. Celia, you're going to go first again. And it's the question here is, what's your overall strategic approach to play in TI4?
Right. So this is such a loaded question. I think that when it comes to my overall strategy, it's looking at every game from the perspective of it's fresh. I think when I was a immature player, a young player, I would carry my feelings from one game to the next, and mostly those were hurt feelings. So I really try to sit down at the table with just like fresh eyes, not think about any other game that I've played recently, just think about the rules, about my core knowledge, and go from there. I try really hard to pace my scoring throughout the game, throughout all the games that I moderated for the SCPT tourney. I noticed that it's not great to be in the lead pretty early in the game. If you can pace yourself and sort of stretch out your secrets and carefully score, you don't get that heat on you as much. I mean, sometimes it just happens with whatever faction you're playing, right? Like, if you're playing SAR or Necro or Soul or Jolnar, you're going to get that heat. You can't do anything about that. But I try really hard to just pace my scoring. In the beginning, I focus really a lot on plastic. I've noticed that the meta has built that people don't like burning plastic if they don't have to. So I try to build my plastic up early in the game and sort of make myself too much work for somebody to come after me, and prepare for stage twos. I think it helps knowing we've played so many hours now, right? We all have these objectives memorized. We all know what our secrets are. So I prepare for my stage twos as far in advance as I can. If I get trade twice in a row, I'm stacking my trade goods. If I am Necro and I follow science, tech every time, I start stacking my command counter. So I think preparing for those stage twos in round 3, round 4, so that when you get to end game, you're all good. That seems to be another strategy that I sort of come up with.
Yeah, we're gonna like free flow this. So whoever feels like jump in. Go ahead if you had something specific that you wanted to respond to that Visionist was saying there.
She raised a very nice point about making it very costly for your opponents to mess with you. It's my experience that if your strategy is simply to make it as costly to screw you up and as cheap for yourself to score points as you can, you're like 90% to winning the game. That is one of the reasons that Ekcha is bad, right? Because they have all these absolute absolute tools of defense, but they are one time. You activate them and they use no field if they have researched it, and now you can't do anything, but then somebody else activates them and they lose. Compare this to Chonar building a million PDS and having ERS siphons and getting trade goods and getting free shots at people screwing with them. I think the game is very strategically favorable to you if you can make it, I don't know, expensive rather than impossible to mess with you. Because then people will just look for somebody else who is easier to mess with.
How does that tie in with your overall strategic approach, Steph?
Well, so there's a lot of ways to do this, right? You can make sure that you have ways to act after the others if you have a big fleet. So if they take your plants, well, you're not gonna keep it. I'm not gonna let you score with it. So why are you even attacking me? For example, there's usually something you can do in your strategic approach to do this. Like I consider this a goal rather than something specific you do. With Medtech, you tech into PDS2 immediately. With Barony, you make sure you have command counters to spare to screw up anybody who's trying to take your slice, things like that.
So I'm hearing like a faction-specific strategic approach. Luke, how does that compare with your approach?
Generally, my strategic approach is like I kind of just try and sit there, and if you can sit there for long enough and not expend any resources, then you're going to get a lead over everyone. And not only do you sit there and allow your neighbors to score like easy enough points that they're content with also letting you just sit there, and you become like useful to them in a way. And as long as your neighbor isn't someone like Tsar, or they don't have an early Mechtel point, or they're not gonna outpace you and win before you sort of don't really care. I don't know. I feel like I have the most awful advice to give from a strategic point of view, because it's a very, very fine line between giving too much away and giving enough away. But I genuinely really like just sitting there and being like, hey, like, you want to grab one of my planets for a round and use that? Just let me retreat out of there. You can have it. Just chuck a couple of trade goods my way. I don't mind.
So Luke, are you saying you've never like eaten somebody's slice in round 2 and 3?
I didn't say that at all. I say generally, if I'm playing most factions where you're not actually out to eat someone, and you're just trying to have a good game, have a nice game. Lots of the time, it's just sitting there, and then it's only the last 2 rounds that are actually mega decisive.
I think that is definitely a factor, though. It's funny because you say nice game, a good game, right? Like, I think that there are definitely games where we all sit down and we're like, let's just play a chill game, and there's not a lot of fighting in the beginning. But some games, especially with some people, deft, that there's going to be a lot of fighting at the table.
I'm not sure I can imagine TI being a chill game. I don't think I am able to comprehend this notion.
Stads, what are you thinking as you hear us all talk about this?
Oh, I'm just thinking that I can't really disagree with any of your points, but they're far too specific for me to really be thinking about that for an overall strategic approach. Mine, if I had one, would be to score 10 points. That's it. And
well, actually, that's a very good point.
Of course, but
good.
You have to get to 10 before anyone else, and each faction has a slightly different kind of inside track to 10. As Hakan, you're going to be hoping for spend objectives and get QDN up, so you score first. As Barony, you're probably going to have to be stopping people with your fleets, so and so, and factions that are higher on tier lists will have a better inside track. Factions that are lower will have a worse one. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Faction specific like Visioness and Deft said. And to call back to Luke's point, I think if I had to say my personal calling card, it's that I'm going to win a game because I made a really, really good deal at some point. And usually that'll be a win-win deal with another player where it puts us both ahead and in the inside track to win. And then instead of worrying about 5 other players winning, I only have to worry about 1. And that's usually my approach to how I'm going to win a game, especially against other great players.
I guess in the general TI strategy thing, as that's a saying, it's very hard to say generalities, but I like to think that by the mid game, you're supposed to know how you're going to win the game. Like maybe you're playing Hakan and you're waiting for those spend objectives and you have QDN up, like Stat says it. But by the mid game, like round 2's end or in the middle of round 3, you should have an idea of what is your 10th point going to be. Like, is it your action phase secret when you have bad speaker order? Are you making sure you're speaker or things like that? Since
I think that's
round, it often comes down to initiative.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've neglected or maybe taken for granted a little bit in this question. Answering this question is just how important responding to what objectives you get in terms of your secret objectives and what objectives are flipped in terms of the public objectives. I think as much as faction, which we have talked about a fair bit, I think what flips and what you get dealt is pivotal to making the plan, and is one of the reasons why the strategic plan needs to be so open and flexible. I also have been thinking about this, in preparation for this this recording with everybody, a little bit theoretically, and realizing that I'm trying as much as possible to manage the table and myself in terms of three big categories, and what I'm calling just power, status, and wealth. Like, they're kind of the classic categories of hierarchical societies, whether they're capitalist or otherwise. And I realize that's, TI4 is ultimately a game that is about empire building and operates with that same like ideological framework. So I'm like, yeah, it's about power, status, and wealth. So power means whatever, like having the plastic on the board, having the strategy card I need to have initiative order in the last round. Status, which is, I think, both a strength and a big weakness of mine, is the ability to manage all those relationships and not have people like just angry at you and wanting you to lose, or vice versa, having people like wanting to help you win, which I think is like a really subtle skill that has so many pieces to it, and is tied so much to our personalities going in. Yeah. And then the last one, wealth, is just about the money and the resources and that. Sorry, Deft, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna wax lyrical about, if you can break somebody's knees, do it, but make sure they can still walk after, just slower. Because if you take somebody out of the race, then they will take you out of the race. It's a very, very tight rope to walk. That's why Luke's approach of I'm just gonna sit here and you shouldn't worry about me is a good one. Like, if nobody is scared that you'll break their knees, then they are not going to do the same to you.
That's interesting, because you said break their knees but still make sure they can walk. I'd be of like the opposite, where I'd either break their knees fully so that they're completely immobilized.
Okay, so
there's like
3 different states here, right? You absolutely eliminate them so they can't even play action cards on you. And then, okay, that's good. Or they are still in the game and they can screw you up in so many ways. That's bad. And then there's a part where you didn't touch them at all.
But then there's
the two extremes, I feel like.
There's the part where you touch them, but you don't actually deny their point scoring opportunities.
Or like blow up 3 of their dreadnoughts.
Yeah, you don't deny it enough that they're not in the game. Because if they're still in the game and have some sort of a path, you might have seen that path and realized that its termination is after yours, so you're going to beat them. But they might not, so they might still think they're in the game.
Yep.
Absolutely, Luke. You have to, if you're breaking someone, you have to eliminate them or make sure they still have hope. Because if you take away someone's hope, where's it going to go? It's going to turn into anger
against you. If their victory becomes your loss, then you're probably going to lose.
Well, maybe. That's the type of
Not always, but it's very rare. I actually had a game not too long ago where somebody told me I'm not going to win it if I start a war with them. And it was very amusing to me, because this was a Nalu who owned a total of 2 carriers, and I was Lizix with 3 dreadnoughts and 4 cruiser 2s. And I was in his slice and about to assimilate his dock, and I decided, okay, I'm not going to do that. And then he said this to me, so I needed to. I was obligated. Like, this is a threat that needs to be taken both seriously, and you also need to have a good eye for it, because maybe it's not true.
I think that's true, definitely. So I, very early on in my relationship with the community, I learned that if you make a statement like that, you have to be able to back it up. I'm curious, though, if you find yourself more often on the other end of those types of statements because of your reputation within the community.
I have definitely been there. One of the reasons I am like this is that I am traumatized by TI. No, I'm kidding. But but definitely been on the other side of it, and that's one of the big reasons why I don't know who else raised the point, but somebody mentioned just building up their plastic a lot. I think it was actually you, Celia. That I play a style where I have a ton of shit on the board because I don't want to get threatened like that. I want to make sure that these sort of happenings go to other people where they are easier pickings. I don't want to deal with, oh, should I pay you? No, you can start a war, but yeah.
I want to wrap this segment up with one with one question that relates to all that, which is my observation and my experience has been, and this is very TTS specific. I mean, we have to acknowledge that whoever is listening to this, like we're all immersed in this online community, which is, and we seek out, I think, competitive players. So the dynamics may be very different depending on the kind of people you play with in the setting. But in a competitive space with experienced players who know the objectives and know what's going on, I would say increasingly I have observed that a plastic and unit upgrade focus has become more and more the emphasis of the more competitive and skilled players for exactly the reason you're talking about. Is everybody like noticing the same thing the past like 6 months or whatever?
Oh, definitely.
For sure. That meta
It has been going on.
I've
Yeah.
only been around for 6 months, so yes.
Like I'm at the point where I'm straight up ignoring 2-in-2 unless it's my 10th point. Like, you gotta build up your plastic and you gotta get unit upgrades. You don't have time for 2-in-2 if you're not beavening, I think.
Luke, what do you think?
I actually completely agree with Deft in that I think now like a lot of players are even like, oh, tech round 1, that's like a, if I'm having a good time sort of thing, like I'd rather just build four more resources worth of stuff. And that's like a much more common occurrence. We saw like there was a game recently, I can't remember it might have been the 14-point tournament where Magi was playing Ghosts, and like at the end of a 14-point game had like 5 technologies and won the game, and was just like, hey, I'm just building stuff. I'm just gonna have more stuff.
Oh, the 14-point tournament had some interesting things about tech.
All right. Speaking of tech, let's move on to question 3. Def, you're going to lead it off. What are your favorite factions? It's about factions. What are your favorite factions and why? What makes a faction good? What is particular is valuable about your factions and things you like, and what's extra?
I don't think I'm surprising anybody by saying that Medtech is my favorite faction. That might get dethroned with POK because there will be a faction with faction-specific cruisers and PDS. We'll see. But yeah, to answer the question, which factions are the best, is basically which ones have the most insane tools for scoring. Because at the end of the day, you get to 10 points before everybody else, you won the game. Whatever else happened doesn't matter.
But about Medtech, I want to challenge you on Medtech because I think a lot of people would put them low on their tier list. But
that's their problem. Medtech is a triple S tier godlike faction.
But why? Break it down for us.
So obviously bread and butter easy choices here are Nalu because you always score first, and SAR because you even score if people try to stop you. You can't lose your home system. Well, technically you can, but you have nomadic. These are the sort of tools that you use to get ahead and then not get dethroned or whatever to get to 10. But I posit that Medtech, my favorite faction, has a stronger tool, because with Pillage, you basically have to allow others to stock up money for spend objectives, and they have the best economy come late game. If nobody can ever score any spend objectives because they have a maximum of 2 trade goods, then you are probably the only one scoring those points. That's one of the best ways to get to 10 if nobody else gets to 10 at all, then then it's not hard to be first. It's just a very good tool to slow down the other people's scoring instead of your own, which is not something any of the other factions can do, bar warring somebody. It's a tremendous amount of soft power, and most of these very good factions, say Seoul, Chonar, have a ton of soft power over the board because they can just say, hey, here's some money, now fuck off. While Barony just sits there and goes, yeah, I get 1 trade good a turn. And by the way, I have 2 dreadnoughts. Yeah, I'm here. So if I had to sum it up, ability to score and soft power over the tables, well, I guess proceedings. And my favorite faction, Medtech, has both of those in very high spades.
Yeah, I'm with you, Deft. I think Medtech is definitely one of the better factions, and they just have such a huge toolbox between salvage, mirror computing, pillage, and ambush. Like They have this huge toolbox, and yeah, I agree with you. But not everybody agrees with us. Visionist, do you agree? What are your favorite? What's your favorite faction? And yeah, tell us.
So I think those sort of like soft threats that Deft is talking about, Medtech's ability. The problem with that is sort of like it's with the more experienced players, it's losing its edge, right? Like if you have a support swap with somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to move into you. It's okay to lose that point sometimes. And I think that's the same thing with pillage. Like it's okay to take trade sometimes, even if that means that Medtech is also going to build up because you're both getting trade goods at that point. So I don't know. I don't necessarily agree that Medtech is the best. My favorite faction to play is Yssaril. I love it so much. I love politics. I love playing that game of chance of just like what action cards am I going to get. I like the choice. I like getting the extra action cards and getting to choose which one I want to keep and which one I want to throw away, and also which one do I not want to be at the table so other people can't play it and now it's in the discard pile. I love green tech paths. Just like hyper feels so good early in the game. And I also like controlling strategy cards. And there's something to be said for taking politics every single round with Yssaril and sort of seeing how you can control where that speaker token is. So I think that I like the control of Yssaril and how much power, soft power that gives me at the table, and something that people on the other side of the table can't necessarily take away from me.
Cool. Who wants to respond to that one with their own take? Stats, Luke.
Well, Celia mentioned the green tech. Just on Medtech's front, the yellow tech, getting 6 in a game is perfectly viable. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Go on, Luke.
So before we make this purely just about Medtech, I think
stop me.
Yeah, this is about every faction, and remember there are 16 of them. Winnu don't count, but there are 16 other ones, and I think you can. There have been tier lists that have been knocked around and like flirted with, and there's like people have a rough idea of like what's good and what's not, but there's like quite blurred, especially in the middle and the bottom of the pack, about what makes factions good and what makes factions bad. And I think it comes down to factions need 2 of the 3 following things. And the first one is very obvious. It's blue tech. The only bad faction with blue tech is Winnu. The only one. Every other blue tech faction is easily high tier. And yes, Ghosts are high tier. Ghosts are amazing. They're the best. But yeah, Winnu can choose to start with blue, and they're rubbish. But every other blue tech faction is good. And maybe this will get touched on later, but blue tech's really OP. Get blue tech. The second thing is synergy between starting tech and tech path, because you can only get like say 5 or 6 tech in the game, barring big agendas coming up or like Jolnar or something being in the game. So you got to get meaningful tech to get to your 3 unit upgrades or to whatever mark you're going for. Maybe it's like a big late game tech you're aiming for. And the blue factions all have, like the factions that start blue have that synergy inbuilt because the blue tech's so good in itself. But then the factions that don't start with blue tech but have that synergy, like Medtech is a really good example, or an example where it's really bad would probably be L1, where they don't really start with the tech that they need, and that's like the main thing that actually stops them from being the best faction, or one of the best.
I feel that way about Sardak too.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a very, very good point. Like Sardak would be a great faction, but they just don't have tech, so they're awful, and they'll always be like in that situation.
Well, in base TI.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, you raise a very good point here that factions need, what did you say, 2 out of 3 things? I think you only mentioned 2
Yeah,
here.
okay, and then the third one is the thing that you actually win the game with. So like Nomadic for Sar, or is it telepath? The 0 token for Nalu. I don't know the name of that ability. Or Era's Siphons.
It is telepathic.
And yeah, or like the thing that's actually gonna instantly win you the game if things aren't going your way. And that's like, you can have that and not much else. And I guess that's the big one that Necro has. Although Necro does tech differently. Maybe my entire metaphor was awful, or maybe like my criteria was bad.
I think
my
your three
criteria is really
criteria
bad.
were good. I think they were good. It's just the first one was a bit blue-centric. I think there's a more general criteria hidden there. But I agree with these three. I think this is what makes a good faction. I agree.
Let's list the three again. Review the three.
Yep. So I don't know what the blues general one is, but the second
Just
one
blue
was
tech.
a good synergy between your faction tags and starting tag and your tag path and whatever you're going for in your tag game, because it's the most constrained resource you're gonna have in the game, tag. And the third one was some specific superpower for scoring or winning the game. Like nomadic, you need to be eliminated or you still keep your points and keep scoring. You need to be eliminated or you have the 0 and you score first. Things like that.
Or even for like Sol, you're not. It's not you need to be eliminated or you'll keep getting dudes, but it's just throughout the game you'll always like get more tokens, and the longer the game goes, the more tokens you'll get, and your infantry are just better than everyone else's. And the more infantry you get, the longer the game goes, and the longer the game goes, the harder it is to kill your infantry.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that when I was talking about this with my husband, he made the comment that the map really determines which factions are going to be best at the table.
I guess the fourth hidden one, like Vishnes is saying, is synergy with the map for your slice, which can elevate any faction from bad to good, except for Vinu.
I think we should quickly introduce Visionist's husband is Jahan, also called Visionist's husband, I guess, in some Discord settings. And Jahan is, could easily be at this table with us discussing. I think that's an important thing to bring out for me. The map is completely determined, and the slice specifically that I'm going to be so the setup method therefore is really for me crucial in determining which faction I think is strong in my situation, because I think tech skips are so pivotal to how I play a faction. What if I have access to a green and a yellow skip, or a green and a blue skip, or a yellow and a blue skip, or whatever, and turtles is an option for me. Like turtles goes from being a mediocre faction to a strong faction in my point of view. If I can quickly get mobile and get my faction techs online, like I'm playing turtles, especially if there's equidistant planets at stake, which makes my flagship a powerful asset. Like important equidistant planets. So anyway, I agree with John 100%. Stads, you haven't said anything on this question of your favorite faction.
I've been listening to all of your good points, and if I'm trying to tie everything together, for me, it's something about a faction's ability to snowball is what makes it strong. To Luke's points about being blue tech and having good synergy, these are the things that make you snowball. Blue tech means that you can quickly and aggressively grab planets, grab territory, score objectives without gimping your economy too much. It's huge, and being synergistic with your slice is a big part of that too. You can snowball so much more effectively if things line up properly. If you get 2 tokens per round from your slice, that sort of thing. As for favorite faction, I think I'm gonna have to.
Before you go on, Stats, I think we've neglected, we've taken for granted people's knowledge of the blue techs here, and why? Because I think obviously gravity drive, but fleet logistics and potentially light wave as pivotal technologies, I think is perhaps maybe our audience doesn't appreciate as much as we do as players, who are so intensely involved. So why don't you talk about that a little bit, Stats? Especially fleet logistics, but yeah.
So blue tech, starting from the ground, anti-mass deflectors, not great. You would prefer to skip it if possible, or start with it. But going into asteroid fields can be big, especially if you're the only one who can do that. It can be very helpful for some secret objectives later in the game. Moving on, gravity drive, probably the best default tech in the game, all things considered. Lets you move a ship
Integrated
one
economy.
faster. All things considered, deft, considering location and synergy with faction tech. But yes, other techs can be very good too. Gravity drive's huge. Fleet logistics, probably the best tech to cap off a win that you research in round 5 or round 6. Being able to do something twice is huge. Especially when you're playing with very good players who have mobile fleets and who will use them against someone who's going to win. Being able to activate your surprise plan and set everything into motion and then do phase 2 of that plan instantly without anyone being able to react is huge. And this can be multiplicatively effective if you're Nalu or have early initiative. If you're trying to collapse on someone and take them out of the game, especially if they're your left neighbor, you can be ahead of them on initiative because you pick strategy card fit first. And Fleet Logistics lets you strike twice against them. That's massive.
Fleet Logistics lets you do it's one of those techs where there are sometimes you get it and it's not useful, and then other times where you get it and it's just completely game winning. Just so much. But there's also the added spice of there's the new Codex action card that lets you take an additional action. So with Fleet Logistics, you can just take a player's entire slice in one turn and they can't do anything about it, which is neat.
I'm looking forward to the stars align moment when you act twice in a row with the agenda and master plan and Fleet Logistics and
Minister of War.
Stads, do you want to finish us off with the best of the blue techs?
I don't think it's the best, but it is the highest
definitely not the
tier, and
best.
it's called Lightwave Deflector. It lets you move through systems that contain other players' ships. It synergizes with the rest of the tree, I think, pretty well. It lets you make aggressive plays more with Fleet Logistics, and Gravity Drive means you can move farther, which means being able to move through systems containing other player ships becomes more important. But honestly, I find this a little underwhelming. I don't normally get this. Maybe you guys have a different approach.
It does something impossible, but that impossibility is not winning you the game.
The main benefit of it is if you can get it, it's better to get in the early mid game than the late game, because
Agreed.
if you don't have Lightwave, you can be like, your neighbor can leave their home system undefended and just have a destroyer like blocking you, and there's nothing you can do, because if they have a sabotage, you can't even like action card Silence of Space to get through. But then as soon as you get Lightwave, they then have to think about every system and they can't just block you.
Yeah, Lightwave is a threat multiplier and an opportunity multiplier. Like, I think there's no doubt about it. I just think it suffers from the same challenge that these other really powerful four deep, like 4-level techs, suffer, like Integrated, which I completely agree with. That is super powerful. Bacterial weapon in specific situations, obviously. Lightwave and assault cannon, like all of these technologies are super powerful and useful. It's just like hard unless there are really no tech objectives and you really like get a lot of tech out, like, and have your unit upgrades too. Like, it's hard to get it online. Like, I think that's what it comes down to.
Really awful in the team's 14 pointer though, when like half the table had assault cannon and I didn't. Like, it just felt really bad.
Oh yeah. So I think I think it was great to dig into blue for a second. Does anybody disagree that, for me at least, like, with some exceptions, like maybe Medtech, maybe sometimes the way I play a red yellow game, or obviously with turtles sometimes, like, but generally speaking, blue tech, it's like there's blue and there's the way you approach blue, and then everything else in your technology, including your unit upgrades, revolves around how you're approaching blue in that game. Is that a fair statement?
I think so, for the most part.
Mostly?
80,
For me,
I'd say
yeah.
85%
Yeah.
true.
What you need, just straight up need, you cannot have a good game of TI without, is capacity that you can use to invade planets with. And the way to get that in distance, because you build at home usually, right? You want to take the equidistance or whatever. You need blue tech to get that capacity over there. The only thing that is not blue is War Suns and Cruiser 2s. Everything else is blue adjacent.
Yeah.
And you just can't have a game without blue unless you're doing something very specific.
I think, though, that with us more experienced players in the community, it's really unlikely for you to play a blue faction without everybody at the table being like, oh, so you're playing Soul, or, oh, you know what I mean? Like, you're sort of like, there's that meta of don't take the top tier factions. Let's keep this a competitive, friendly game.
There might be something like that. I don't feel that way. I love playing Jonar. I just never researched Graph Drive because Jonar is, even though Medtech is the best faction, Jonar is the strongest. You can just get away with researching literally every technology in the game without any blue and still win the game with Jonar because of their insane economic advantage. Just to go back to this blue question. Unless you're doing something specific to counter your need to move around dudes, you need blue tech. And only the strongest faction in the game can get away without completely doing it at all.
I'd say they can get away with it, but I would rather have blue. I would rather have Grav Drive at least. I'd rather have Fleet Logistics, as you'll know. I'd rather have Carrier 2s. You know what I mean? Like I would rather have and Fighter 2s. Like I would rather
use my Cruiser 2s to take your planets and build 6 dudes on them with integrated economy.
Well. I haven't played. I admit, because I do exactly what Vision S is talking about. I avoid playing the strong factions. I generally play a lot of Yin and Yasaro and Medtech. Well, see, Medtech isn't considered by some. I agree with you, Def. They are, but I love playing them. I play a fair bit of Turtles and other stuff. So I don't play Jolnar very often. But yeah, I think if I played them, I would agree with you. Like they,
but yeah, there's an undercurrent of, hey, let's play some of the more fun factions that aren't as boring in our metas. I agree with Business on that.
Yeah.
It's just I personally don't feel the pressure on it.
Does anybody want to say anything else about factions and this question?
I guess I would reiterate the 3+1 points we had on what makes a good faction that Luke started.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get good movement capacity, which usually means blue tech, Carrier 2, Dreadnought 2, that sort of stuff. Do you have synergy in your tech path and starting techs, because tech is just such a big deal on and what kind of resources you can get, and do you have a superpower to win the game with, like the Nalu Zero or the insane economies of Soul and Jonar? If you have 2 of these 3 things, then you're a good faction. And
don't
the
forget
unspoken
map.
fourth one, yes, the unspoken fourth one is, if you have the right skips, or if you have a good enough slice, or maybe you have specific things going on for you, like a rift that you're gonna get lucky on, fingers crossed.
You're gonna get lucky.
Then there might be other factions you should consider. Luke also mentioned L1, who have a very bad synergy, according to him, with their starting tech and what they want to do in the game. If L1 has a blue skip or a yellow skip, then they are top tier, straight up. If they have it round 1, that skip, then they are very, very good. You should pick them. They are fun.
This raises a neglected question for me that we haven't talked about vis-a-vis the factions. For me, commodities, starting commodities, 2, 3, or 4, or 6, like it's so much how I evaluate the factions. It is the main reason why Barony and L1 are low on my tier list, because there are 2 commodity factions. Obviously, Medtech has another way to get around that. Other ways, I should say. So how do people feel about starting commodities and the way they evaluate their faction? Luke and Stats, particularly, because you guys haven't said as much.
I think 3 is fine. 4 is great. 2 hurts. 2 hurts a lot more than 4 is good. And 6 is amazing. Hakan is wonderful. So fun to play.
Yeah, 2 hurts, but I just see it as that means that you don't have to play nice with the tech person, with the trade person, to get your little, refresh, and then you pay them 1 to get the rest of yours. Like,
what are they going to do to you? Not refresh you?
So
you're
it's like, well, it's like lots of the time if you have 2 commodities and you're paying 1 to get refreshed, you're making 1, and then the person holding trade is making 1. So you can just be like, nah, I'll just not do that and not give you money instead.
I think though that's like indicative of TTS meta, because the games that I played in real life haven't gone that way. So the 2 commodity faction isn't as sad as it is on TTS with the debt meta.
Yeah, let's unpack debt meta for 1 second, Vision S.
So debt meta is X -1, commodity -1. So if you are a 2 commodity faction and you want the person who has trade to refresh you, you have to give them 1 of your commodities, which leaves you with 1, and it feels terrible.
for sure. But then,
obviously, if you're a 4 commodity faction and you get this deal, then you are swimming in money because you got $3 for literally doing nothing except saying, yes, you may become $1 richer to somebody else.
And I'd say it's fair to say outside of tournament games, at most other competitive to fun levels in TTS meta, it's like
We have
90%.
definitely looked at it.
Yeah, 90% of games deck meta is happening despite Brian's protestations.
yeah, up
True.
until like round 4 or 5, typically.
Yeah.
But
And then it's completely shut down. And it's funny because like we're not going to do debt meta, right? And then it's round 2 and everyone's like, so you're going to give me that commodity, right?
I think we should be specific. X-1 and debt meta are not the same thing. X-1 is just what you described, Celia. And as long as you're neighbors with that person, X-1 just happens off a trade and it's normalized. Debt meta specifically is you're not neighbors with some people and you nonetheless
Promise, yeah.
Yeah, and that's very normalized as well in general in TTS. Not everywhere, not everybody, but I'd say that is not necessarily what's going on in people's tables. I have no idea
If you
how
want to
that.
pull out a really, really insane pocket strategy, or I guess tactic, is say you'll pay someone and then just don't do it. People will be shocked, I tell you. They will be shocked.
People will try and end your game off that. You'll do that round 1 and they'll be like, right, I'm playing all my action cards on you now. And that's like the level that it gets to.
And this is why debt meta works, because it's just not worth it to break it.
Yeah,
Everyone
it's
wants
one
to
trade good.
be the same. Yeah. Wouldn't you want to be friends with people for just one trade good? It's a very cheap price to pay.
Right, but it works sometimes, but also the thing is that we all carry our reputations with us from game to game in TTS. So you don't want to be that person that becomes known as not paying that promise.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very real point. I just detest that it is true.
Yeah, I agree that it's real, and I actually like it. I think that one's reputation in the community is important, and it translates into people's play groups in real life play groups as well. That I think there's similar dynamics.
I don't know, like your reputation for being decent in a game, as in you're not a horrible person and you act nice, should, of course, that makes sense. Your play style having a reputation, I'm not a big fan of that. Personally, I have had some events where I was, let's call it, profiled for being the best TI player in the world, TM. And it hasn't been a very good experience. I had a game where I was a ghost. I had a single carrier and 2 flimsy destroyers, and Jolnar paid Hakan 6 trade goods to not trade with me because I'm the best TI player in the world. Like, okay then, fam. Let's see how this game ends for the 2 of us.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's
have you tried like not being the best TI player in the world?
I know, Duck.
I don't know, Luke.
Player. God.
Maybe I should lose the SCPT tournament first.
Yeah, what I'd recommend is being in a bunch of streamed games and just like chucking everything through a gravity rift multiple times. Or, like...
So definitely reputation matters, and definitely it can be challenging for people with a reputation of being good that they just aren't going to get fair terms. And I think there might have been, for me, I think I might have got a bit of heat in this recent tournament game because of whatever coaches were telling their players from other places, for example. But in terms of let's move on because we have a couple more questions and we have probably about 15-20 minutes. But I think that was a really rich discussion, so I'm reticent to move on. But we have a question about Mechatol Rex, and it's maybe we can try to be relatively brief about this one so we can get to the last question. Stads, you were going to answer first. The question is, how much value is the Custodian's point off the hop in round 1 or 2 versus compared to mid-game Imperial double scores and or Rex points, and what's your overall approach to points related to Mechatol Rex?
Short answer, Custodians is awesome. Can I spit a little bit of stats at everyone patience? That's cool.
Yeah.
So in the last year, at least since I joined Ish, there's been 3 publicized tournaments in TTS. There was the 2020 SCPT tournament, and in the semis and final, Custodians won 4 out of 7 of those games. Then there's the 14-point invitational, where I will count every game because it was an invitational meant to cater to quote unquote high level players. Custodians won 3 of those 7 games. And there's also the Blue Space Faction Pack, which is a little bit off the topic here, but it was basically a homebrew tournament, and Custodians won one of those as well. But back in 2019, there was an SCP tournament, and Custodians won none of those games. So I kind of wonder if it's getting better and better over time. If you add up all of those, that's 8 wins out of 28, or 29%, which is quite a bit better than random chance, right? Random chance is 17% chance to win. That's almost doubling it. And just when I'm playing a game, if I get Custodians, I feel like I can't have a bad game from there on. I'm always going to be in it to win it. I won't necessarily win, but I will be close and I will be competitive because I have a point that no one else can get. It was cheap. 6 influence for a point is awesome. Controlling Mechatol Rex early can be awesome if you can get 2 tokens from it. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's way better than Imperial because drawing a secret is very important.
I have like a little thing. I made some like really brief notes before this started, and one of them is Custodians is always good because it means that you don't need to score 3 secrets typically, or if you do score 3 secrets, you don't need to score a 2-pointer ever if you can get a support. But if you can get Custodians and also spend Mechatol for 2 tokens before you get kicked off, you will never not have a good game. Like, unless you then get immediately gone on by all 5 of the rest of the players. If you can get your Custodian point and leave with your 2 tokens, you'll pretty much always be in a great position, like later in the game points-wise.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I will bend a lot of things to get that point. And I did in this recent tournament game. In my whole opening strategy was around getting it. But there's a reason. The reason is it's a 10-point game. 3 secret objectives is 3 points. 3 or 4 stage 1s is either 6 brings you to 6 or 7, and and then there's where the rest of the points going to come from, right? Are you going to have to get a stage 2, right? And so if you get one stage, so anyway, you guys know the story. But I want to compare this question. So getting the Custodian's point solves one of the like that math problem. You can get your 3 stage 1s, or sorry, your 4 stage 1s, a rec or a support. Sorry, your 3 stage 1s, a support for the throne swap. Your Custodian's point brings you to 5, 1 2-pointer, and 2 secret objectives brings you to 10. Or you can switch that up a bit, but it really opens it up. I guess my key question in this my key curiosity in this is, how do you compare the Custodians versus a mid-game Imperial double score or Rex point?
You asked 2 different questions there, Patience. How do you compare it to a mid-game double score, or how do you compare it to a Rex point?
Yeah, so answer them both.
So the Custodian and the Rex point, I think they are generally speaking about the same. Sure, the Rex point was basically free, but you took Imperial. That means you didn't have a better strategy card, because Imperial doesn't do anything except win you the game, and it only wins you the game if you're actually winning the game. Instead, you could have Leadership that gives you 9 influence or whatever. You get the idea. In the round, you get the Rex point. I think it's about the same as spending 6 influence as taking Imperial.
But what about the secret you draw when someone else takes Imperial and scores the Rex point?
Imperial is kind of like Tech in my mind. You don't take it round 1, but it will get taken at least 2 times during the game. Usually even 3. So you'll end up drawing all your secrets, even in a 10-pointer if you need to.
Yeah, but drawing your 3rd secret in round 4 versus drawing your 3rd secret in round 5 feels very, very different to me.
Oh,
That's
it sure
a
is.
Huge disadvantage.
It is. It definitely is. That's why you want the Custodian point instead. But then you spend 6 influence early game, right?
Yeah.
Like, they are basically the same thing, just with different upsides and downsides in my mind.
I want to get Visionist in on this, but I just want to say one thing. For me, increasingly, as a player, this question of where and when am I getting this extra point? Is it Custodians? Is it a double score off Imperial where I still get a secret? Is it a double score, or is it a single score off Imperial where I get the Rex point? Whatever it is, where am I getting that extra point? is one of two really high-level strategy questions that's very game-specific, game by game, but I'm always thinking of it, and the other one is initiative order and the flow and movement of the politics card and just where that, and we're going to get into that when we talk endgame a little bit, I think. But I think those are two high-level strategic questions that newer players may not consider as much, that, and maybe
It's
even
definitely a defining part, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
a VP agenda comes along and nukes it all.
So we've been
Vision
talking about this a bit.
It's like I want to get Vision S in on this question of custodians, double score, Rex point prioritization.
Oh my God, absolutely custodians. The numbers prove it. If you get it, you're more likely to win the game. Having that point in the beginning, not having to use that point early for like a, easy objective. So I got custodians, so now I don't have to spend my 3 command counters to, score that point. It's so nice to have that point early and be able to sort of pace your game in a different way. Mid-round Imperial?
Mid-game, yeah.
Mid-game Imperial? Hold on one second. We got a bad boo-boo.
Okay, you do that. I'll get Luke in. Luke, jump in on this one.
An important thing that nobody has mentioned is you pick the Imperial strategy card, and you are not entitled to a Mechatol Rex point. You have to either have Mechatol Rex or take Mechatol Rex, and then play the card. So one way of doing that is with the Fleet Logistics, a great tech in the blue tree. Another way of doing that is have overwhelming amounts of ships on the board. And the third and much most common way is to pay someone to, not, or pay people to not oust you off Mechatol, which can make the point quite expensive.
I think we can put this back to our previous points, where you gotta have the good economy to pay people off, or you gotta have those units, or which factions are good. A lot of that comes down to, can they get custodians? Do they have the blue tech to get to Mechatol in 2 rounds?
Yeah.
Right? Because Mechatol is 3 moves away from your home system. If you're gonna be the first there, you don't want to do it over 3 rounds now, are you?
Agreed.
There's like the custodians token pretty much always, except if it's an absolutely dreadful map, or it's like you're actually playing with the 6 bottom of the barrel factions. The custodians always gets taken round 1 or 2, never round 3, just never.
That is facts right there.
Like you could probably concoct a scenario where it doesn't get taken until round 3, but it would be a stupid scenario, and I'd ignore it.
Usually you can rely on, or at least at a more competitive table, you can rely on it being taken first action by somebody round 2.
Yeah.
Not necessarily leadership. I'd say 50-50 leadership, someone else will do it.
Yeah, and I think what's important to think of strategically as you're getting more skilled in your game is you need to think, okay, what strategy card am I taking first round? Where are things going to land second round? Can the people ahead of me who are going to pick before me get to Rex? Or even though, like in my game, when I took Diplo, got the Yssaril flagship out off Warfare in the first round, got the Yssaril flagship to my middle system in front of my home system. I knew that I was picking fourth. I was way down the list, but I figured the people ahead of me weren't going to have the ability to get there. Behind me were Siren Soul, so I just needed to be picking strategy cards before Siren Soul, and I was going to get to Rex just by taking whatever. I would have taken Diplo if I needed to in that game to make sure I went before them, but luckily I think I got my hands on leadership. Anyway, that's just a concrete example that's very specific to a specific game, but you need to think at that level, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I actually kind of forgot to mention this in our overall strategy part, but something I like to think a lot about, when the game starts, is, can I expect to get specific strategy cards at specific moments? As we were talking about it, to get a Rex point, you already need to take Imperial, but when are you taking Imperial? Is it even available when you want to be doing that swing round, Rex point, kick someone off, all of that shebang?
Mm-hmm.
And is someone gonna public disgrace you? Does someone have political stability? Are you gonna
have I upset my neighbors already so they play cards on me at this juncture? Will I be able to pay off the person there, or whoever's trying to kick me off? Or can I bring enough units because I had trade the previous round to build up really high or whatever?
There's politics. Is there going to be a politics writer? Yeah.
But I think these questions all happening at once in one's head, vis-a-vis initiative order and what strategy card I'm getting my hands on, and what is the board state? Am I going to be able to score that Rex point or double score off of Imperial? Like, all those things are the things you need. Like, if you're a more advanced player, I think that you're balancing all the time in your head, as opposed to just figuring out what's my tech path, or what's, how much class can we build. Like, those things are important, but they're like secondary considerations. What we're just talking about is what I'm spending most of my time working through, right?
Yeah. Well, that's because we are very experienced and we can just jump over the minute-to-minute things.
Yeah.
Can
but
I
yes,
transition?
this is something.
Sorry.
Yep. Go ahead, Stets.
Can I transition Patience's comment about picking, or Patience and Defteris's and Visioness's comments about picking it, to the importance of being careful when you sell Speaker? Because for me, I think selling Speaker has become slightly too automatic, because if you're putting it one to your right, then you're going to be one behind in the round after that, and you'll be in a worse place for agendas too and all that. But I think that's something that needs to be thought about more, and I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Luke, what do you think?
On the selling Speaker thing?
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. I feel like
sold too much, but
I agree that round one is the only time where I'd sell Speaker automatically. And the reason for doing that is because, unless you're specifically taking it to get Mechatol, right, and you're going to give somebody else the opportunity to get Mechatol ahead of you by selling it. But say, for example, you're just taking it to get Tech next round, and the person on your right's in the position where they want to get Mechatol, they'll be absolutely like begging for you to give them Speaker, and it's like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll do that. But like later on in the game, in the agenda phase, if you're Speaker, you can get paid like a fair amount of the time, and the amount you get paid can usually be better than the amount you're selling Speaker for. So not only are you a later pick, you're just denying yourself the option to get paid.
I want to use this to transition into the last question about endgame and set up for the endgame. But I just want to say about selling Speaker, I think it's a key thing happening in the meta right now, where people are thinking it. Certainly, I'm thinking increasingly about selling it, not just to the person on my right. Where do I want to sell it, or where do I just want to give it if I need to, in order to position the picking order going into, well, I started thinking of this as early as like round 1 and 2, but definitely in round 3, where are things going to line up so that I'm picking ahead of the people I think are the threat here, and or at least not being left behind, or picking last or whatever, going into the final rounds, which is exactly what ended up happening to me in this recent tournament game, which I keep using as an example. And the solution for that was in round 3, when I had politics, I should have given the Speaker to Yin, who was 3 spots to my right. And that was actually the smart move, even if I wasn't paid. It would have kept Speaker on my side of the table. Instead, smart players take politics in rounds 4 and 5 if they get their hands on it. And that's what ended up happening. I ended up being at the end of the line. And anyway, so I think I want to use that as a transition to talking about the end game. Obviously, we were using it as an example to talk about Rex and getting your hands on Imperial. But yeah, let's talk about the end game, starting with Luke. How much do you set up for the end game, and what are your priorities when you're doing so?
Most of the time, when the first stage 2 objective flips over, in that moment, you should see the terminus of the game and like when it's going to end. And of course, you could be slightly wrong. It might end like a little bit later if no one can manage to do it, or like a little bit earlier if someone has a secret objective. But the first stage 2 really gives you your clear indication of when is this game going to end. And then once you know when the game's going to end, you then have a target of where you now need to put yourself and like what position you need to put yourself in. Because of the objective, you'll know what steps, what hoops you're going to need to jump through, because most of the time you will need to score a stage 2 objective.
Can I stop you for 1 sec, Luke?
Okay.
I think this line of thinking presumes something we haven't emphasized in this discussion, which is observation. To getting to the level of comfort playing TI, that you are spending also time observing everybody else's path. and understanding where they're at. And that's hard. And it's hard for people like me with tunnel vision a bit, but it's key. And I think knowing what's going to happen with that when that stage 2 flips requires observation and understanding where everybody else is positioned. Sorry, keep going though.
That's a very fair point, because in TI, there is not actually that much hidden information. It's action cards and secret objectives, but apart from a few action cards that are worth keeping track of, there aren't many action cards that are going to like drastically turn something around, because if something will, someone else is probably going to sabotage it, or you could sabotage it. So it's pretty much just secret objectives as hidden information that's like mega relevant to when the game ends. And then once you've established all of this, like if there's somebody that you know is going to end ahead of when you could possibly end, your goal is then, well, I need to stop this person winning, and then that becomes like a focus. Or it's like if there's somebody who's going to have a win that's unstoppable, for example, like a tech objective comes out, and you see the writing on the wall, you see Jolnar, they are going to score the tech objective, you cannot stop it. You then are like, okay, well, that's the end point. I need to win before this, and that's just the game. And then the next step is, okay, what do I need to win? Do I need these planets? If the answer to that is no, why are you defending them? Get that stuff off and get it somewhere where it can be more useful. Do you need your home system to win? Most of the time, the answer is yes. But if you're going to win off a secret objective, why are you defending your home system? Go and do other things. That's how I'd approach the end of the game. Like I said this before in I think it was the SCPT interview that I did, where it's like I like to win with having absolutely nothing. If I have no planets and one ship and one infantry on the board and I win the game, and I've played it perfectly, and I know that.
Because you've leveraged all your resources.
Yeah.
I feel like there's like an assumption there that you are able to use all of those resources to hasten your own victory. Like, you shouldn't just throw away your stuff and go on Hail Marys. You should only do this if you are actually getting some benefit for doing it. Because what if you fail and you have to go next round, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
As Luke is mentioning, yes, sometimes you can know for a fact that you need to win. So you should absolutely push 100%. But there's something to be said about, okay, maybe their game will go another round because we managed to stop them together or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a tiny pushback.
That's fair. But I'd say that's knowing when your victory is and like how confident you are in your victory. Obviously, if your victory relies on something that isn't 100% given, like somebody could just turn around and mess you up all of a sudden, then you do need to keep some of your stuff. But if you don't, then
Visioness, what are you thinking about this endgame approach and what's being said?
Yeah, it's so weird, right? Like the majority of us higher level players, I wouldn't consider myself a high level player, but the majority of us higher
Come
level
on.
players, we've been playing together for a real long time. So we sort of just like take turns winning. And I feel like you recognize that momentum really early on in the game. I once listened to this podcast that was like, if you're in a position where you have to throw a Hail Mary, you screwed up round one. And I think that I try to think that way round one, round two, set myself up for the objectives that, there's only 10, right? Like stage one's 10, stage two's. We have an idea of what's going to be coming out. So you do the best to set yourself up. Then you have your Hail Marys in the back pocket. I will say that I try really hard to hold on to my secrets until what I think is going to be the last round. I try to figure out where politics is going to be, like Patience said. I feel like that's becoming more and more important. But another thing that I frequently see is that you don't want to be the clear winner. I think I talked about that early on in this. If you are the clear winner, you're going to have everybody throwing everything they can at you. If you can be the second place winner, the third place winner, and then everybody attacks the first place winner and you slide into that victory, that feels so much better than having everybody attack you and just like having that like icky, yucky feeling at the end of the game. And I think too that king making, win making has sort of become this funny thing where it's like, all right, well, if this person that I don't necessarily enjoy playing with is going to win, I'm going to help this other person. And I think sometimes I see games devolving into that too. So there's so much to consider with the end game. I think that if you're a mid-range game player, one of the things that you can work on is just your ability to stay awake for the whole game and stay focused, because that sort of like in-game longevity is really, really, really important, and it certainly helps you when it comes to the end game and thinking on your feet and whether or not you're going to be going that extra round or not.
I just want to say as an extra to what you started with, Silly, or I guess in the middle. The easiest way to lose a game of TI4 is score all 3 of your secrets by round 3. If your shot is obvious, then you're going to get piled on. Your secret objectives need to be paced very, measuredly. Like sometimes there's a reason to go very fast on them, sometimes there's a reason to slow down, but the point is your 10th point should be your last secret.
And if you've got an action phase secret, all the better.
Oh, even better, yes.
I was hoping someone would touch on that and the power of action phase secrets. I personally think that the luckiest thing I can do in any game of Twilight Imperium is draw Spark a Rebellion or make an example of their world. Or any of the action phases are good, but those two in particular, because they just open up your paths and let you do exactly what Vision has said, let you sit back and conceal your power and slide into victory so effectively.
Stads, what else do you have to say? I completely agree with you, obviously, about action phase secrets and really like which secrets you draw in the base game, which we're talking about here, out of the 10 is so pivotal, and it's going to be really exciting when POK comes out to have 20 more, right? To have all these other secrets to choose from. But for now, we've got these 10, and they completely shape the options for your end game and your game in general. So what else do you have to say about your end game, those stats? Because you're the last one to chime in on this.
When the first stage 2 objective flips, end of round 4, beginning of round 5, I want my home system to be safe. And I'm beginning to think that there aren't really any exceptions to that. Well, there's going to be SAR, of course, and maybe if you've gummed it well or have enough ceasefires, whatever. But in general, when that stage 2 objective flips, like Luke said, the chips are down. You should be able to see the end game terminus, and you can respect your opponents enough to do the same. The home systems are going to matter, and making sure people don't even think about being able to take yours, I find that's just so key. And maybe it's not even strategically that necessary, but it's a huge peace of mind, in my opinion.
It's one of those things that Luke mentioned. If you are very confident about what you need to accomplish, then leaving your home system might be okay and might be the right path, but 90% of the time, you should just defend it properly. Because come end game, people will try for it.
I take it that's less often the case for you, Luke, that is it true that more often than maybe what we're hearing here? Like, I agree with Def. Most of the time, my slice is pretty solid, unless I'm really stretching in the last round to get that 6 planets or whatever for the stage 2 6 of a kind. But I'm getting the sense that you more often find you're deploying all your resources and left with a relatively empty home slice.
Yeah, see, I'd kind of describe myself as a terrible player, and what I mean by that is if you watch like a lot of my tournament games and stuff, I have terrible mid games. Like they're bad. Like in the SCPT final, a round before the end, I had 3 L1Z1X dreadnoughts next to my home system. What were they doing there? I don't know. I didn't want them there, but they were there, and it's like you just gotta just roll with it, deal with it. It's a game. We're here to have fun and throw some ships around, and at the end, you end up winning. Woohoo! And then no, if you appear weak on the board, it can actually benefit you in some scenarios. But okay, the bit about losing your home system, probably not good advice. Don't follow that. Just defend your home system, please.
So there's this classic scenario, right, where you hold Spark a Rebellion and you're at 9 points. You should absolutely under no circumstances think about leaving a single ship in your home system, because you want some dinky ass carrier to move in there, take it, and then kill it for Spark. You can score your secrets while you don't have your home, so you should not defend it in that scenario, for example.
Agreed. I don't know if
Try-
this happens often, though.
Well, setting up for an action-based secret, whether it's Spark or destroy their greatest ship or unveil your flagship or make an example. So, the PDS one, the turn their fleets to dust is a little more, I think, case specific. But those four, like setting up for one of those as your final point is, I would say, I don't know, I'm going to throw out a guess, like 10% of my victories of victories of high level players, maybe even 15. You know what I mean? Like it's an important consideration, right?
Yep.
It
If you
might
can
even
get
be
to
higher.
9 points before the round where you're going to win with your action phase, you have almost certainly won the game. If it's a scoreable action phase, obviously. Like you have built your flagship for Unveil already, or there's a flagship around you already for Destroy, or you get the idea.
I love it when people leave just a lone ship and I've got Spark or something in my hand. It's like, yes.
For turn, yeah.
Perfection.
So
And
we
patience,
started this. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, patience, I think your 10-15% is drastically low. Just off the top of my memory, thinking about the most recent SCPT tournament, I can think of both the finals and at least 2 of the semis games where the winner won because they pulled off an action phase secret play. And at least one more where it came down to an action phase secret play being denied. And maybe
Action
those
phase
aren't
secrets
necessarily
are extremely strong.
And maybe those aren't necessarily representative, but yes, they're incredibly strong. And I think like 40% might be more fair, to be honest.
So we've been skirting around this, I think, and didn't really talk about it enough. Come endgame, come the last round, you should already be at the number of points where you can end it in one round, obviously, right? Because the game is going to end. You need to win by then. So usually it comes down to 7 points because you score your secret objective and the 2-pointer, or 8 points. You score a public and the secret, or 7, again, if you have an action phase. The big reason action phases are so very, very, very powerful is that they allow you to score faster without meeting the stage 2 requirements. And they can also open up paths when you're only at 6 points.
I agree with that. I also think that and everybody that we've neglected another piece of this scoring calculation and setting up for the end game, which is support swapping in general, and specifically the timing of the support swap.
We could write a long book about support swaps. I do it. Get a point for a point. It's a good deal.
Yeah, and I think people who think that sucks have an argument to be made, but I think that because unlike like what some people would say, which is you're supposed to be nice with your support partner, like that's just not true.
That's
right?
not true. That's
yeah,
absolutely wrong. As wrong as it can be.
Yeah. So the support for the throne swap is a very dynamic and political decision, and it actually, I think, it greatly enriches the game. Obviously, it's not the only way to use a support for the throne, and that's part of what's cool about the support for the throne is it has other uses in terms of bribing people to do the things you need to do, in terms of baiting people into thinking they're safe from you, etc.
I guess a high-level consideration to make on the topic of supports is: are there any supports out in the last round? And if they are, can you cajole someone into giving you one? Bumping you from 6 to 7, boom, you have a shot. You just had to tell them you can't score your secrets. Usually more than that if they are paying attention. But
I want to hear other people's opinion about the sport, but I do want to ask you, Def, real quick first. I have seen a number of really good games lately that I've been with you. A couple of them were with Olo, maybe somebody else, where you have traded towards the end of the game. You have been one of the 2 people sitting on your support. You have traded it with your close competitor to put you and them out as the clear winners, potential winners, and it's been like a race. And it's paid off, I think, in one of the times or something. This has happened like 3 times in the last 3 games I've played with you. That has happened, and I'm just like
said,
late game support swap. Yeah, but
books can be written about the support and the support swap, and those would be 2 very different books. I don't know, the end point, the terminus of this discussion is the support swap winning you the game? Then do it. the easiest way to tell usually is like in the example you mentioned. I traded with Olo. Well, I was gonna trade with Olo to push him to 10 in our latest game, but he was on my left, so he was after me in speaker order, and I had an earlier initiative. So if either of us is going to win, or rather both of us, then I will do it first. So it makes sense to trade then. I like to keep my support around for the last round because nobody will ever pass up on a point if both of you have a shot because of it. And there's no reason to trade it early, in my opinion. But again, we could write books about the support exchange.
I want to hear quick responses from others before we wrap up here, either specifically about supports or about the end game in general. Whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Deft, I disagree about there being no reason to swap your support early. One of my favorite times to swap support is when someone does an aggressive move. From the aggressive person's standpoint, the support swap kind of cements their gains. It means the person you just beat isn't going to come after you looking for revenge. Probably. They might break it, but let's not worry about that for now. But the weaker person is also happy because they just lost something, but they're getting an on paper equal deal. They get to lick their wounds. They don't have to worry about people pushing further into them.
My pushback on this point is that this type of support exchange is not a deal made in good faith. One of you is getting the better end of the deal here, and maybe neither of you are aware of it, but one of you should not be accepting this deal. And if it's in the mid game, there's plenty of play left over to rectify that. Like you just took something from somebody and you offer them a support exchange, I'll accept it, but with immediately thinking about how I'm going to take your slice for it. I'll rather lose that point, and if you think you're safe, capitalize on that mistake.
That just might be our different play styles.
It's entirely possible that I consider it a mistake to exchange supports with somebody you're at war with, unless it's in the last round and you're absolutely sure they are either not going to take it back or that point is enough for you to win.
Luke, what do you think? Weigh in on this.
I think it's really interesting, right? Like, we recently saw Patience play this game with SAR, where he was able to sort of leverage a support so that he didn't have to worry about SAR the whole game. I think if you can leverage your support in a way that gets the main threat at the table away from you and makes everybody else worry about it while you stack up your points, you've now leveraged your support in two ways. You've gotten somebody off your back and you've given the table a target. So it's sort of really, really nice there. I think I like to hold on to it until at least mid-game, because sometimes you can eke out a very profitable agenda with your support. You know, I really want to get that extra action card. I really want to get the free tech, whatever it is. You can use your support that way to sort of like make that point work for you for the entire game. So that's sort of where I stand on that.
So you brought this example at the beginning of Patience's exchange with SAR in that game. For those of you who are not aware of what the game looked like, Patience was playing Isariel, and he really needed SAR to not bother him while he went off to Mechatol with his flagship. And we actually discussed it with the player later, and we came to the conclusion that support exchange, she was supposed to accept it, yes, and then immediately break support on her next turn. Because you're just not supposed to let Isariel get away with that sort of things. If they force you to make a support exchange, just break the exchange. They're going to give back your support when they take back their slice, right?
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of us as more experienced players, is we're not afraid to break that support. We're not worried about losing that point so that we can gain it later on or whatever. But I don't know that everybody plays that way, and I've certainly seen the newer players
for sure.
Yeah, worry about breaking that. That's like really binding to them, where the rest of us are just like, it doesn't really mean that much.
I guess where I come down on it is a support exchange is either manipulative or good for both of you. And those are the only ways it can be. And this one was of the former kind.
That's a nice way to frame it. I don't know if I missed something there because I had to go for a second. But Luke, did you have anything? Have you been chiming in on this? Did you want to get something on this before we start to wrap this up?
The thing about support swaps is you don't ever want to be the first to do it, because if you're the first pair to trade supports, it draws more attention to you. But not only that, it means that I like to think that if nobody exchanges supports, that's a good thing for me, because
You
the
just
later
sit
the
there.
game goes, the better I don't know. I'd like to think that my experience helps me navigate end games, and the longer it goes, like the better that is. But again, you don't want to be the last person to trade supports, because then you don't get a choice. So the sweet spot is you want to be the middle pair, so then you still have like a bit of option, unless like a really good opportunity comes up, and you'd be stupid not to. The kind of the thing is, at the end of the day, like in most games, you are gonna swap supports with someone, so you kind of have to park yourself in that mindset.
You should look for a buddy to exchange supports with, like not upset them too much, even if you're gonna upset the others.
I agree there, Deft. I think that with the people that I've been playing a really long time with, it's frequent that I have somebody on my left or my right that I have a good relationship with outside of the game, and I'm like, we're not going to fight this game. Let's just get this extra point off each other.
Yep.
Yeah, meta is definitely a factor. It's, and we could talk about that all day through another book. I think we're going to wrap this up. I think I'll give like everybody a quick chance to like any final nuggets of wisdom or whatever they feel they neglected. They'll just let it free form on whatever you think you want to leave people with, the listeners with. So go ahead, Deft.
Well, I guess I would say that faction specific things that help you in the game, say you're have the zero Esnalu or your Medtech, so you know that the others only get trade goods if you say so, assuming you get neighbors with all of them, but you should. Is what you should be thinking about and leveraging very hard to get to 10 points. And then you should make sure you get there first. So in order of importance, I guess, how are you going to play your faction throughout the game to get to 10? How are you going to get to 10? Which objectives are you going to score? Where are your points coming from? Are you getting a exploit, etc.? And then are you going to make sure you have the lowest initiative so you win at the same round earlier than the others? Or are you going to win a round earlier than everybody else? I guess that's the overarching TI strategy thing I would say go take with you.
Visioness, how about you? What are your parting thoughts?
I am Visioness, #3744 on Discord. I am always happy to help new players navigate TTS, or if you just need an introduction to some people in the community. I'm in Eastern Standard Time, New York State. I'm happy to help. Always looking to expand the community and welcome new players. Sometimes it can be intimidating, but don't be afraid. We're all new once. And then outside of that,
He crushes you.
we have an expansion coming, so the game is going to be just like completely different in about a month, and I'm really looking forward to playing with everybody and just learning what that's all like. So yeah.
Awesome. Luke, how about you? What are your parting thoughts?
My closing thoughts would be, just have fun with it. Like, the game is for fun, not for trying as extremely hard. I mean, you can have fun doing that, but statistically, you should only win 1 in 6 games. So any you do more than that means you're a great player. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Luke. Stads, what would you like to say?
During this hour and something minute talk, we touched on good players and skilled players, putting those in quotation marks. I just want to sign off by saying I think that's mostly an attitude thing. It's a certain approach to playing the game. It's a certain mindset of when you sit down. And we've been talking a lot about that. But if you're listening to this and thinking it's not really your thing, then yeah, as Luke said, game is fun. Have it your way. If 6 people get up from the table and they all had a great time, that's kind of a win for everyone too, even though one was the actual winner.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think what's really cool, not only about the game, but about the TTS community, is there's enough personality, there's enough strategic dynamism, there's enough competitive spirit and laughs that are just created by this complex 6-8 hour experience, 5 to 8 hour experience online, that we can have all of those things. Like, that's what I think is really cool. I mean, whatever, sometimes people just get really angry with each other, and that happens too, and then we can laugh about that later. So the salt happens, but in general, the game is so many things all at once, and there's such a strong community of people in the community that is, as Visioness I think rightly said, like, you are welcome to be part of. Like, it's really, it takes a time commitment. That's really the bottom line. Like, are you addicted? Are you willing to put in the time? Then you're part of the community, right? Because it's a really open and friendly community, and all those things can happen. And I think the strategic level is just like, I think excelling at that makes the fun all the more so. And that's just my opinion, and not everybody shares that, obviously. But I think that this discussion has greatly enriched that, the community discussion around strategy. I know it was pretty high level, and we flew from thing to thing, and we covered a lot of ground. But I really appreciate everybody participating. So thanks to each of you. Thanks to Flat Tomato for recording and producing. That's huge. Obviously, it wouldn't be happening. We have some other thank yous, I think, to pass out. I would like to personally just thank a couple of people like Phil, Roy, and Raptor for the mod and the Discord. That is the anchor and the foundation of the community, and all the work that they put in, and all the other admins and mods, but especially Phil and Raptor, and then Hunter and Matt from Space Cats Peace Turtles, who have produced so much quality discussion for us to agree and disagree with and riff about online. And I think it's worth saying, like, there's a ton of rich strategy discussion on the Space Cats Peace Turtles Discord, as well as on the TTS Discord, the TI4 TTS Discord, where people can learn a lot more. But we need to thank Hunter and Matt for facilitating so much of that with their episodes. And then, unless anybody else wants to thank anybody or I've forgotten anything, I'll say a couple other quick things. Does anybody else want to say any other thank yous?
Yeah, thank you. I agree. To SCPT, Raptor, yeah, and to you, Patience. You put a lot of this stuff together, and you're such a leader in the community, and we all appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being part of it. Cool, and I'm hoping COVID is not a thing come Gen Con next year, so we can all get together and play and drink. Okay, but and whatever else we want to do. But I'm looking forward to the next episode. So this was Strategy 101.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm looking forward to the teachers checking our homework.
Exactly. So what we've got coming for you next, if you've been with us through this hour and a bit, is we're going to take this recording, we're going to give it to Olo, Seven, and Mantis, three of definitely the best TI4 players in the community and probably on planet Earth. And they're going to each have their own rant about it. It's facilitated rant by me. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be slammed together as TI4 Strategy 201. And maybe us will all get back together somehow to do 301 after Poke has been out for a while. All right, so thanks again, everybody. Thanks to Flat Tomato again for making it happen, and thanks to the listeners. Thanks to being part of the community. It's such a great thing we all do together. So thanks all around.
Thanks, everybody.